I think it was interesting that he thought that this whole list was about moral indoctrination when the list is not just about moral indoctrination. Like the list is about lots of different things, and he seemed to be
I
saying
picked
that the
out
whole
a specific thing, like a specific vibe and flavor of some of the items.
yeah, like it's kind of got the
So
vibe that like yeah, art should be for something, and like one of the things that it could be is for moral indoctrination, but it wasn't saying specifically that that's what art should be for. Like that's definitely not what the list was
yeah,
saying.
we should probably give some context for our viewers on, I don't know, everywhere after we post this on a blip somewhere. So Josh Dorlani posted a list of what 15 pretty big differences between good art and bad art, and it was an interesting list. And then Liam Bright tweeted a takedown of the list, which was an interesting takedown. And then I was like, these things are interesting. And then Sam was like, they are interesting. And then we talked about it. And that's this.
Yeah. Liam said, "This is the right coded version of the idea that all art should more or less have the form of morality play. So the criterion for good art just becomes skillful moral indoctrination and exaltation. In whatever guise, we should resist this because it's super boring."
Well, it's super boring as your edition.
No, he added that as a reply.
Oh, okay. I see that now. My first instinct is to just go through the list one by one and say what the two of us think about Josh's original proposal of what good art is versus bad art.
Let's do it.
And then that can ground us in like the original claims, and then we can know more how much any of this should be resisted. So the first item was good art improves your mood, bad art makes you feel weird.
I say false. I think good art, both
Yeah.
some good art makes you improves your mood, and some good art makes you feel weird, and those are both great uses of art.
Yeah. Like I guess if you're in a society where everyone's mood is in desperate straits and they just need to be have a picker up, like in a society where happiness is scarce, you might be like, all of the resources of society should go toward things that improve mood. But I live in a culture of abundance where many people are happy. And you might want to like see an art film that makes you feel weird because it's just a nice change of pace.
Yeah, but maybe there's the argument that like maybe the people there are a lot of people that aren't doing so well, and that like the art that's made for me and you, like maybe there's an argument that there's something like anti-egalitarian about not making the art for people that are not doing so well, and maybe there's a lot of them and they're just not in our circles, and so like maybe we should maybe we are in the scarcity world, we just don't see it as much because of the circles we're in.
Yeah. So there's an empirical question of exactly how like much abundance there is around. Um, and also like we could look at the people who have the most like shitty moods and ask what they actually want. And then try and figure out how much they're correct about what kind of makes them flourish more in various dimensions. Because it could be that, I don't know, maybe someone, yeah, it's a little complicated because maybe you're sad and you watch a sad movie and it gives you some catharsis or some feeling of like not being alone, and then that actually makes your like life better, and you like, I don't know, you are more productive or whatever metric we're going to use over the coming weeks. Part of what I'm interested in here is evaluating the claims. I'm also interested in trying to get a sense of what Josh was doing. Like, why did he say this? Like, what is Josh's goal here? What is his perspective?
Yeah, well I'm sympathetic to his project, to Josh's project, even if I might disagree with a lot of the individual claims, just because I like the idea that like, hey, like the world is full of lots of bad art and we could do better, and like there are things we
Yeah,
can say about that. And I tend to find like Liam's being snide about this project not value aligned with me. Like I actually like we could make lots of majestic, beautiful art that is like wonderful and incredible, and we're not doing it as much as we could.
yeah.
And so,
Like, I don't know whether Liam is against the project of improving art. Um, I could see it going either way. he's clearly against the project of improving art in some of these directions. So he doesn't think that those are improvements. But I guess, yeah, if you're making fun of the project, if you're making fun of Josh's thing, that is some evidence that maybe you think the whole idea of optimizing art is silly.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think the two of us are on the same page that art can do better and worse at stuff.
Yeah, and maybe optimizing one thing is bad, but like if suppose we were optimizing like 40 different things, then there's the question of like how well are we optimizing those 40 different things? Like if it's the case that we're optimizing for nothing, that seems much worse. Like optimizing for one thing is better than optimizing for nothing, but optimizing for like 40 different things is probably better than optimizing for one thing. You know what I mean? Because different people need different arts for different purposes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean optimizing all at once. I mean like different communities trying to make different things.
Yeah. Like if I tried to articulate a perspective where it doesn't make sense to try to optimize art at all, like a nihilist perspective doesn't really work here. I think because nihilism also should be indifferent to whether you like nihilism should be like shrug. You could optimize it. You could not optimize it. I don't care. Like I don't know, art. There's no aesthetic realism. There's nothing equivalent to aesthetic realism, such that we should care about making art better or worse. Therefore, go ahead, make it better. I'm not going to get in your way. Like, I don't have any stake in this. A perspective that might be more anti-optimization is something like a Chesterton's fence perspective, or like kind of Zen perspective, where you're like, well, art is at its best when no one's trying to do anything with it, and you just kind of let things organically happen, and let the chips fall where they may. Like I could see that being a view.
Yeah.
And I think from our perspective, we want to like study that and find out if that's true, and then incorporate it into our optimization, and just kind of have some of the optimization be a bit relaxed. Like don't push too hard in some directions because that might break something. But like it's all, I think from my perspective, it can all fit into a larger project of optimize, like try at hard things where it's useful, and where it's actively useful to not try, don't try.
Yeah.
And don't kind of settle for what happens to have already occurred. Don't settle for where art falls at equilibrium when no one is particularly steering or trying to make art good.
Yeah. One way I disagree with Liam is like, sure, not all art should be for moral instruction, but like for sure some art should be about good moral instruction. Like I don't want none of the art we make to be giving us lessons that are useful for guiding our lives. Maybe a lot of art should be like that, even if not all of it should be like that.
Yeah, I empathize.
I especially want that more
Liam's
than
point.
bad moral lessons. Like I especially would prefer art that has like like
art that teaches you that murder is good is probably worse on average than art that teaches you that it's bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I get and empathize with Liam's point if he's saying like the one overriding criterion for all art should not be whether it is teaching good moral lessons. But that could be like in the mix as like one of 30 different things that are sometimes good for art to do.
Yeah.
And if Liam disagrees with that, which I would be a little surprised if he disagreed with that, like it sounds a little straw to me to be like, to imagine my interlocutor being like, oh yes, art, it should never teach any good thing. So I'm imagining that Liam is more in the perspective of this, like the gestalt of all of this list would end up with a version of art that is just too cleaned up, too stripped of messiness and like interesting wrinkles, and like you would get rid of all of the like cool like HBO dramas that aren't heavy-handed and trying to get you to have a certain moral view. You'd get rid of a lot of the exploration that art does of the human condition, and a lot of the like journeys it could take you on that are towards some just like interesting part of mind space, rather than being a didactic attempt to make you take the lint out of the laundry lint holder at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I get what Leah might have had in mind.
Yeah.
Although it still seems odd to me as a response to this particular list, because the list is not talking that much about like trying to inculcate people with values, but it's in there.
Yeah. All right, let's just quickly go through the thing and
More
so
of the list.
yeah. So physical number two, physical effect, boost energy, saps energy. I mean, I generally agree that it's better if art gives you energy than like makes you tired. Like I
Yeah,
most of the time. That's true.
seems like a
Uh
case.
Directional changes. Sets off an upward spiral, sets off a downward spiral. I'm not totally sure what that means, but generally I want people to be put on upward spirals. So like I guess I
Yeah,
mostly
like
agree. Like
if downward spiral means like your life falls apart, that
yeah,
seems maybe like a bad thing for art to try to do. If
yeah,
downward spiral means you get kind of lost in thought a bunch and like have an existential crisis and like you're kind of spiraling over some topic, then I'm less confident that's always a bad thing. Like it can be fun to kind of obsessively ruminate over some like dark topic that art has brought to your attention. Although I don't think that's for everyone at all times.
yeah. Like, I don't want most art to be making people feel depressed and uncomfortable. There's a place for that kind of stuff, but like most of it shouldn't be because humans prefer happiness to sadness. Let's see. Mental effect clarifies the mind versus confuse the mind. Yeah, I mean most good art that like it's better to clarify things than to confuse things. Like it might be useful
Yeah,
to
I
like
mean, if we removed art from the equation, then and just asked like, you're going to do something in the world that has an effect on other people. Is it better if that clarifies or if it confuses them? And it usually clarifies.
yeah,
Like, there's a subtext here in terms of why are we talking about art rather than just generically about what things are good or bad. And I think that subtext is probably a lot of what Liam's responding to. And like, I think my mental picture of Liam when he sees a thing like art should clarify, not confuse, is Liam goes, you're thinking of things to confuse the mind as like artsy things or like kind of obscure things or things that like have a like push a moral view that you don't like. Like by clarify the mind, you mean it should be all art should be extremely simple, cookie cutter, no obscurity or effort required at all to understand the message. Just a Captain Planet episode, and like you're kind of you, Josh, are judging art and whether it's good from within the perspective of is it reinforcing the things I already think are good and things I already believe and pushing those hard. Uh, and I imagine my shoulder Liam worries that a lot of the way that you could end up escaping a wrong ideology or wrong perspective on the world is by consuming confusing art that does not immediately make you feel like everything makes perfect sense, because that could introduce some dissonance and some alternative perspectives that can then maybe like enrich your hypothesis space or make you rethink something you thought you knew,
yeah,
which I
I
guess
agree.
in the long run might have a clarifying effect. But like I'm trying to consider both the steel and straw versions of Josh's proposals because they are very ambiguous.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we
kind
can
of
all agree that art that's like specifically intended to be misleading is bad. Like not that's not something that just enriches hypothesis space, but something that's like actively
trying to trick you
trick you in various
about something
ways and
important.
have yeah about important things. I think is like I would say is almost always bad.
Like if it's trying to trick you in the sense of like it's a murder mystery novel, and then at the end it reveals everything, but it like used some like um, trickery to make you not immediately realize that what the mystery was. That's fine. That's
Yeah,
great. The thing we want to avoid is art that uses deceptive means to try to convince you of something false in a lasting way. Like you've got some like climate change doesn't exist book that uses fallacies that are made more emotionally compelling via the narrative structure. And that's like not so good and might be a reason for like art to somewhat steer away from like communicating facts about the world, because it might sometimes be hard to make really honest art that will convince you if the claim it's arguing is true, but not convince you if it's false. Like if you're reading a book, I think often the message of the author can be more compelling than it ought to be based on the evidence the author has provided you.
Yeah.
And that might be a reason to make art both less kind of to make art less informative about true things, because you might need, like it might be like what Scott Alexander calls a symmetric weapon, where that same art could have been equally used for truth or for falsehood. And the author maybe happens in this case to be using it for truth. But if the methods they're using would have worked just as well for falsehood, then maybe we should just avoid using those methods at all.
Yeah. Number 5, faster versus slower. Produces momentum versus produces stagnation. This seems identical to the boost energy, saps energy thing. And in general, it's good to give people energy.
I think I could worry that, like, if you approached a painting you were making with this list and we're like, uh-oh, I used the wrong color to produce momentum to the maximum degree, I could see that kind of sucking. Like, I don't know in what context I'd want people to have this list in mind, even if I directionally agree with some of the items, like boost energy is good. Like, I don't know, should someone making a 30-minute film be thinking about trying to boost the energy of their audience? I guess they should be thinking about, for the kind of state I want my audience to move toward in mind space, is this like an effective choice for reaching that state? And like often making your audience bored or listless or distracted from the movie screen will mean that the state you're trying to produce, you won't get there very well. So you want to kind of have things happening enough that they're like have some energy, but I don't know that you want to like maximize energy.
It also just seems like energy is low on the priorities of art for art in general, in terms of like when I go to a big cathedral, it's not like, oh yeah, it's like instead of going to get a coffee, I'm gonna go to the cathedral and get a real like pick me up. No, like the cathedral, it's about like making you feel the grandeur of the universe and beauty, and think about larger things, cosmic questions, things like that.
Yeah.
And like energy is a very small part of it. So I don't know.
And momentum is a small part, and clarifying is a small part, and upward spirals are kind of a small part.
Like I agree that when you go on a run, you want music that gives you energy. And there is plenty of music that is very high energy and it's great for that purpose. But like most visual art doesn't do that, and even most music doesn't do that. This is focusing on a lot of the fact that qualities in art that I don't think are as important.
Yeah. If we're like looking at something like what novels are winning the most awards or what art is getting shown at the most galleries, then I think there's more reason to worry that maybe like signaling is taking over and people are rewarding bad art over good art, maybe in some of the ways that this list is worried about. But if you look at something like music seems much more like what people listen to is what they like. And indeed, a lot of what people listen to is not music that is going to like feel like bulletproof coffee to them. Like the next item is like bulletproof coffee versus weed. Like a lot of music is not aimed at boosting your energy, clarifying your mind. It is aimed at all sorts of things, like including a lot of sad music that's very popular, and a lot of obscure and like weird music that's very popular. And music seems to be like a thing that is much more like directly responding to what people value, because it's less like we're not looking at what like wins at like some obscure art music festival. It's like which things are getting the most listens.
Yeah. I think when I think about bad art in galleries where it's all just like signaling sophistication, I don't think it's producing like stagnation or sapping energy. I just think it's like kind of boring. And so it's interesting that like
it's an opportunity cost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like
I,
you get the vibe that Josh is worried about art kind of making society decay and collapse, and like people are like losing sight of the truth, and they're like losing sight of their values and becoming like twisted inside. Whereas, are you saying, Sam, that your worry is almost none of that, almost all just like we could be having all these like complex, euphoric, interesting experiences, and we're not because we're just having the equivalent of like a concrete block here where there could be like a beautiful flourishing plant.
yeah, exactly. And like you could
Just a
be
bunch
doing
of like
much.
neutral experiences that could be great.
Yeah, exactly. That's mostly my objection. Though I do think that like cities should be actively pleasant to be in just because pleasure is good, and I don't think people are helped by just being around ugliness all the time. I think it helps to have some trees around. It helps to have some pretty
Yeah.
colors. I just think that is good for humans.
I would I would like it if there were some cities in the world. Like I would like most cities to be like beautiful, like full of like plants and like crazy architecture and things that fit together well and like kind of organic shapes. There are definitely some. I would love it if there were some cities that were just off the rails and had their own aesthetic that was completely different from the other ones. Just like,
Yeah,
here's the like scary town where everything is scary and like dark. Like that'd be sweet. But I think there is more of an argument against that than there is for an argument against scary, weird art
yeah,
because it's hard to move.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you can try to establish a new city and warn people at the start, like, this is going to be different than the other ones. This one is a city for people who have a high tolerance for, like, I don't know, loud noises or something. But people, have partners who might not have the same taste as them. They have, they'll go to a city for jobs, like, and people get stuck in a city maybe after I don't know their taste changes or something. It's harder. There's more of a case to be made for making cities kind of uniform because it's annoying to move.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's like there is a like approach to city making that is probably like maybe there's a few parameters that can change a bunch based on like culture and so on, but for the most part, I think people want the same things from a city. If you
Yeah,
just take the median person in different parts of the world, I think they'll all be happy in a similar sort of like visual environment and spatial environment.
the weed versus coffee thing is funny because I think weed just makes all art better, and I know people take weed differently, but I just think I would much rather go to a an art gallery on weed than on coffee. So I feel like that one I'm just like
Yeah,
actively against that one. So there's something weird.
yeah. I mean,
I'm
technically, he's not saying things about
yeah, what drug you take, but
what drug you take before the thing. He's saying a thing kind of
mm,
like after you've consumed the art, do you feel like hyped up and amped up, and like focused and ready to like go about your day, knock it out of the park, or do you feel kind of contemplative and like I don't know, you're wearing a beret and you're kind of getting lost thinking about those are cool shapes in the clouds. Like if
I,
maybe this is, I
yeah, I
mean
disagree with him here. I
that
want people to be looking at the clouds
yeah
and wearing berets and
yeah
cuddling with each other when they look at art rather than.
yeah. It's interesting because the cathedral example feels to me like it's much more a contemplative, like lost in thought sort of vibe, not a bulletproof coffee kind of vibe. And if Josh is like trying to rep the conservative perspective on art, which is kind of Liam's take, then it's weird. The cathedrals seem like much more on the liberal side. They're old and religion associated, but it could be that we're misunderstanding something about Josh's perspective. Josh has not said this is the conservative traditionalist perspective on art. He has said this is the good perspective on art. So there's no need for him to say like cathedrals are good. He could just be like, no, cathedrals fucking suck. Uh, we should replace them
Hot
with
take. We
like,
need to make the best art, but cathedrals are out. They're too
yeah, we
pretty.
need to make,
Art shouldn't be pretty. Art should be making you energized. Like,
yeah, instead of
like
replace every cathedral with like a fucking skate park with a
yeah,
like laser tag and like big like I don't know, just 80s music, getting you ready to like go to the gym. maybe this is not his view.
It's not his view, but it's a funny view. All right,
It
number
is a funny
7
view.
is art.
Hopefully that's someone's view.
Yeah, I do want that someone's view to be like, yeah, the real problem in society is just.
I do want that to exist. I want there to be
Yeah.
cathedrals of 80s music and like figure skating. That seems great, but maybe not. That'd be the only thing.
Yeah, like people having more energy. I'm in favor of people having more energy. I think it's a good thing. But like maybe the coffee is better than like art itself being optimized for that. It seems like maybe it's the wrong tool. Just like art,
Yeah,
maybe
it's
not the
weird that
best
there's
tool
so much
for like teaching economics. Like art might not be the best tool for like
Yeah.
giving energy. Like in
It's
general,
weird to me that someone would be this worried about art making you being kind of a downer, being kind of energy sapping. Like, what is this a huge problem in Josh's life or in the life of somebody he knows? Like, who is afflicted in a deep and like damaging way by the fact that art does not make you more hyped up? I guess maybe being less uncharitable. Maybe I should think of Josh as similar to Sam. Like Josh is not necessarily saying that all of these are examples of ways that society is like endangered and like collapsing and decaying and what have you. Maybe it's just Josh sees a bunch of like movies and listens to a bunch of music and so on, and it's just like, wow, this sure is kind of neutral on a bunch of dimensions I care about. Why can't it just be good instead? Why can't it like actively make my day better and help me like get through like hurdles in my life and like just bolster me as a person? I would love it if like it were just like maybe Josh acutely feels like a bit less high energy than he would like, in the same way that Sam acutely feels a bit less aesthetically enraptured than he would like. And you're both just kind of trying to make art more like the thing that plugs into like the big gap in your life. But I do think it's easier to make the case that like a random person in the world, that like the world could be made much more like beautiful and cool and like interesting and varied in ways that please the eye, then the world could be made much more like could be improved by being much more like bulletproof coffee.
All right, for 7, structured and rhythmic versus unstructured and obsessively anti-rhythmic. Like, I mean, I agree that art should have structure and like the sweet spot is organized variation. So like variation on themes. Some things vary, some things stay the same. Humans like not too much order or too much chaos, somewhere in the middle. It's like if you have too much chaos, it's a mess. Too much order, it's boring. You want somewhere in the middle. So
which is not what he's saying. He's saying go in the direction of structure and rhythm.
Well, maybe just be directionally. That's
what you're saying. Right, find a compromise.
Yeah, but also I think he's saying like.
So would you agree with him that like it'd be nice if more art were more structured currently on the margin?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that your take?
I agree with that. Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I think we're in a sort of Dionysian norm.
Although it's interesting that he calls this category essential nature. That's not quite the same thing as on the margin. I would like this to be a bit more this, but I mean, maybe you also agree with that. Like maybe the art of art comes from the attempt to impose order on it and structure it deliberately. Otherwise, it would just be like a flower in nature, not designed by anything.
Yeah.
I don't care about what the essential nature is, but I care about what I take as the subtext here, which is yay structure, boo unstructured.
Yeah, and I think that is a subtext that I agree with. I think cathedrals tend to be better than most unstructured things, and they're very structured. But I wouldn't want a cathedral that's just a cube. Like you need the variation in the patterns and shapes in a cathedral. That's kind of what makes it good.
I suspect that I like unstructured art more than you do. I could imagine that maybe I'm more into like confusing and disturbing experiences than you, and I'm more into like weird jazzy performances that don't have a lot of like obvious structure to them because they produce an interesting experience in my head that's new, including like very dissonant and experiences. Like I like a lot of those. I think the way I think about this is like, so initially you're like a baby, everything's very chaotic and new, and the things you'll like will be like extremely structured. And then you learn those patterns, you get used to them over time, and they get kind of boring and old because now you know to expect like what will come after the like peekaboo. It's like, okay, I get it. You've like learned more causal models, and you have learned more what patterns occur ordinarily. So now maybe you want to hear music with a bit more dissonance, not just like very like major key normal lullabies. And I think of the thing art should do as figuring out cool structures and solving like constraint problems where you can like do interesting things via like restricting yourself. Like you have like a poem. The poem is constrained by some meter, and therefore you can achieve like brilliance in various ways by like surprising people, fitting the constraint in a clever way. And maybe the meter has certain effects.
Do you think art right now should be
But the dissonant art, the art that violates expectations, the art that's like breaking the pattern, I think of that as just like often typically like a good, cool thing that is not anti-pattern. It's more like you learn certain patterns in music and poetry and so on. And because you've internalized them so much, you can get more value out of things that break those patterns. Like in some sense, it's still treating pattern as a crucial part of art, but it's like the meta pattern of what you tend to see in art. And then like this one violates that. And therefore that's like interesting because you've seen 20 rom-coms already. You know how they tend to go formulaically. And it's the formula is that way, possibly because that's just the best formula, treated on its own terms. But then the 21st rom-com you see totally breaks that pattern, and you get some like cool new experiences and like some euphoria and so on, because like it wouldn't have been necessarily a good experience if you saw it first, but because you're seeing it 21st, you're getting like the pleasant like feeling of, this is like a new thing. I got surprised, I got tricked, like cool. And that cycle can just continue because now once you have things subverting the rom-com formula, you can have things that subvert the subversion of the rom-com formula. So like it feels like a natural progression where art starts off very simple and structured and then gets increasingly like fuck with you and increasingly like deviating from structures, because people like novelty, people like cleverness, and there are more ways to break a structure in surprising, interesting ways than there are ways to satisfy a structure for most simple structures.
I think there's a difference between art that is like, I think it's good to have lots of different structures because variation is good, but trying to be structureless is going to be worse for me than just like much, much, much more different kinds of structures. Like me wanting to have 40 different formulas for rom-coms seems like pro-structure, not anti-structure, and wanting there not to be any formula at all for a rom-com kind of like being kind of anti-structure rom-com and just putting people together and just seeing what happens.
Yeah.
I think just kind of kills what a rom-com is. Like you do need something. There needs to be romance. There needs to be people that you root for to fall in love.
The thing I care about is not whether this is a good rom-com at the end of the day, but whether it's like has improved people's lives and like added to human experience in cool ways, including ways that are pleasant and ways that are dissonant. If it's cool, a little bit talking past each other because you're talking about does it have any structure or not, and I'm talking about does it violate the expectations that we had before seeing it. And there are lots of ways to violate expectations without making static on a TV screen.
Yeah,
and indeed, it's pretty rare to see stuff that is just static on a TV screen. Some like modern art is pretty interested in like going that far in various ways. And yeah, that does tend to be pretty boring. Like it might be cool to do once, but then there's not that much to do with that. You'd only see so many like paintings that are just a red square before you want something new.
Exactly. You want more art to violate expectations?
I believe that you think that too much art is trying to do something like signaling sophistication or signaling like conformity to some in-group that has weird artistic preferences, like make everything look like a concrete block. Too much art trying to kind of signal cynicism about things just for the sake of signaling cynicism to like show that you're smart and above the fray and so on. and that therefore there's a ton of low-hanging fruit in the form of art that just kind of hits our very simple, easy to hit buttons of this is pretty, this is cool, this is interesting, etc. Seems right to me. I guess I want a world with less like sophistication signaling and more surrealist, like giving people weird as fuck experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I would be happy both the world where everything's much more novel and surreal and the world where everything is just more pretty are both improvements to the current art world that we have. And I'd be kind of fine living in both worlds, you know? But the world of surrealism and the world of beauty are both improvements to our world, even if they're different worlds from each other. And I'd be happy living in either world. Like, it's annoying that the kind of
I do want
novelty,
both.
yeah, it's annoying that the kind of, like, in the current art world, they're not actually giving you novelty. The way that they're trying to violate expectations is the same way over and over and over, and it itself is boring. They're not actually trying to give you novel experiences. You never go into art gallery and it's like, oh, here's an ant simulator where you're just going to experience what an ant life is like. That's just not. I mean, that's a completely. It's a cool thing
And I
you could
mean,
do, but no artist tends to do that, and that's boring.
yeah, you could certainly have also a lot of weird, surreal experiences that have a ton of beauty in them.
Yes.
So I don't think of these as particularly in conflict. I think that we can optimize both of these things at once. And I think the base level should kind of be the beauty thing, because part of the what makes the subversions so fun is that you've already established a baseline that is like really awesome that you enjoy, and it's starting to get a little bit old, maybe. Yeah, like it. One way of maybe diagnosing what's going on in society, aside from the whole signaling sophistication by making bad art thing, or counter signaling how good of an artist you are by I don't even have to try to make a beautiful composition, etc. But another diagnosis is that some people get bored of the normal shit faster. Like some people get over the equivalent of like songs that are lullabies faster and want more expectation violating stuff to happen. And society as a whole, I would say, probably hasn't gone to that point yet. Like maybe after we like enhance our intelligence to like 200 IQ and can just much more richly predict all the shit that's going to come at us from music, we'll be like, okay, let's stray from the formula more. But if we're not there yet, if we're still enjoying the like exploration of the many possibilities that come with kind of first level art, then we're not there. Then we're not going to get as much benefit from leaping to second level art that is all about breaking the rules of first level art.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And also, like, I'm kind of building in an assumption here about how human brains work, but maybe it's not particularly true for most humans that we ever get tired of, you know, the obvious classical artistic forms. Maybe that's just a good way to have life be organized, where like that's the way it is forever. Things are pretty in all the obvious ways because that's how our brains are built. And maybe there's not even a need to edit our brains to like get bored of that shit.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think
maybe we just hit.
some art requires novelty more than other arts. Like you get tired of a song faster than you get tired of a building, and you get tired
You
of
get
a
tired of a
joke.
song faster than you get tired of a genre too.
Yeah, and and you get tired of a joke faster than you get tired of a song, and you get tired of
Yeah.
like so different mediums of art would want more or less novelty. Like I generally want cities to be filled with like trees and psychedelic cathedrals and like beautiful lighting, and I think and like maybe even like giant crystals. I think we would just like not get sick of those very fast. I think humans just like them a lot, and would for a long time.
Yeah, and maybe we hit kind of an optimum of humanistic experience pretty early in our history, and then we just coast after that.
Yeah,
it's not the worst outcome.
Yeah,
Novelty should not, in some sense, come at the sharp expense of the other things we care about. Although I do like novelty and change and so on. I mean, I am inclined to be in favor of kind of the hipster instinct to be like, I don't like that anymore because it's too popular. Like I'm extra attracted to this thing because not many people know about it or care about it. Because instincts like that help create some churn and more exploration of the space of ideas.
Yeah. But there's so many just like there's so many ways to play chess, there's so many different permutations on just a simple board. There's so many permutations on like, hey, we're
Yeah.
only gonna do classical themes and psychedelic themes, and that's it for the next 100 years, and we would never run out of like stuff to do. So
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next thing. Instinctively recognized as art, instinctively recognized as a scam. I mean, I agree that scam art, it's all about signaling specification, is bad, and we should throw it in the dust heap of history. Like, I don't know. I would say 99% of art is instinctively recognized as art, and maybe there's like 1% of things that like are hard to recognize as art, and then they're actually. I agree, it was good that they did it.
Yeah. I think I basically disagree with this item on the list. I think that scam is the wrong category to apply here. Like, I don't know, they're successfully making money off of selling art that you don't like. That is not a scam. That is you not liking the same art that other people like. Maybe the reason they like it is stupid. Like, I like this art because it's like novel, relevant, and maybe that's like a dumb reason to like art. But it's not. Yeah, like I think that the reason I don't like this framing is that it's not centering do you like it or not? It's centering is someone getting away with something, which I think can lead people astray from like understanding what's going on and appreciating art for the right reasons. And also, I think often things feel like scams to people that are not scams. Like I think people are sometimes suspicious of like modern art and whatever because of scamish things, and they're like getting at something. But sometimes I think they write off art too fast because it's not what they expected and what they thought they wanted. But if they were a bit less defensive and in a hurry to like dismiss everything that's like weird and new, they would actually get something cool out of the experience.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't care if people make money off of stupid things. I feel like the whole instinct to like punish scam people is just should not be as big of a part of life now that we live in a community of billions of people versus trying to protect status resources at a tribe of 100 people.
Yeah, I do think there's something that feels scammy about like the 400th person that made a blank canvas that's like selling that for $100,000 or whatever. Like, I don't know. It's not maybe not a scam exactly, but something
They're trying
about
to make money.
There's something about the whole art community and like the way like a healthy community that has like better epistemic and moral norms wouldn't like that wouldn't have happened in that community. Like there's something that's dysfunctional about going on that is not exactly
I think there's things like
but like I don't know.
I think there's a unwholesomeness about having a pretense of being really into art for art's sake and just like kind of innovation and exploring the far reaches of experience for its own sake as your like mask. And then really what you're doing is trying to win a status game or trying to make money.
Yeah.
I think that is bad. I think it is pretty universal. Like I think that people who do classical art nowadays are probably more likely to be interested in it because of just the beauty for beauty's sake. But I mean, people are still going to be doing it for the sake of signaling, like, and for the sake of winning status games, for the sake of making money, etc., while not being totally upfront about that. I think society should just be a bit more Hansonian and be more willing to recognize that we have low motives for a lot of things and be honest about that. And then I think it would mostly lose the problem. Like, I think it's fine to want money. It's fine to want esteem. It's fine to want to build a skill because you want people to like you. People shouldn't be ashamed of that, and they shouldn't have this whole persona or this whole like community-wide persona that's trying to hide that. Just be what you are, and that's totally fine. It's hard to get there because if you're the only one admitting that you're a bad person, then everyone else can like win the status game. But if we just got everyone to kickstart together, like we're all going to simultaneously admit that we have a mix of low and high motives, then that could help the world.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Number 9, good map versus a malevolently bad map. I think that
What does
goes
this
back.
mean?
I mean, I think it goes back to should art be true versus should it lie to you? And like, yeah, in general, art that's true is better. I mean, it's like I'd prefer truthful art to lying art. Though most art is neither true nor false, so I would say like this only covers a
I
very
want
small
to
subset art part.
I want to see what things Josh thinks of as malevolently bad maps and whether I agree. So I feel like I've seen
Yeah.
very little art in my life. I mean, I think I've seen almost no art in my life that's malevolently bad map. I think what the usual case is that people are wrong about the world, and then they deceive others into being wrong in the same ways via their art.
Yeah.
Because not out of malevolence, but because they're wrong, and they're not being maximally honest and using of asymmetric weapons in how they try to argue for and communicate their views. But no one is doing that to a first approximation in the world. They should, but the good guys and the bad guys are both using bad methods right now in almost all cases.
I do kind of hate propaganda art that's like pretty bad, like in the sense of like they're trying to like an art that was trying to tell you how great the USSR was during the height of it. I would kind of hate it just because like, like come on, it's false, but like B, like the USSR is not going great right now, and it would be nice if people knew that. Input.
Continue.
Sweat, tears. The input should be sweat, tears, and struggle versus obfuscation, lies, and resentment.
This is not a true dichotomy. You can do both.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Artists do both.
I don't think art needs to have struggle. Like, I mean, some kind of art is nice to be like, wow, you spent 10 years doing that. That's cool. But like, if you can make some awesome shit real easy, I want you to make awesome shit because awesome shit's good. Like, if you could just like telepathically with your brain make like crystal patterns and give them to people that are cool, like, I don't need you to struggle. Just do the cool thing.
Yeah. I predict that you like AI art more than I do, partly because you're less into the struggle.
Yeah.
Although if the AIs like had transparent thought processes and I could see into their heads and hear their about what led them to produce the art they did, and it was true, then I would object to AI art a lot less. Like, part of what I dislike about it is, I mean, I guess it's not even necessarily the case that like AI art is easy to make. It's just that the hard parts have been outsourced to non-human processes. So actually, I think the objection I have to AI art is more about, first of all, humans don't get to enjoy the process of making the art. Second, it's like I'm wary of like, there's some treasure and fence stuff here. There's some stuff where I'm like wary of optimizing too hard and like losing cool things about art, like variety and like the fuck ups that go into art that add some interesting texture. But then also like the biggest thing is maybe that we don't know what the AI artist is thinking. So not only, and we can't experience that ourselves, but also we don't know like what computations went into producing this. So we're kind of losing all of that. Like, unconscious processes are like unconscious and opaque processes are now producing the art, and that feels to be like a much bigger loss.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for you, more of the point of art is the final output, and we can certainly produce more and better art with the help of AI tools, even if they are opaque to us.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's quite about the sweat, blood, tears, and struggle that I care about. It's more that the humanity that is going into like the artistic process matters to me, like the individual's personality being like reflected in it, and which I mean you get a little bit of with the with prompt engineering, but it's a very kind of small amount. Not very many bits are transmitted via you putting a prompt into an AI versus a master human artist like deciding each individual brushstroke.
I agree with that. In the future, AI will be better allowing you to put your thoughts into the art, and then you'll have more of your humanity in your AI art. So I think this is a temporary
Yeah,
problem.
I don't know what the optimum thing looks like.
I mean, I think the optimum thing
thing
is you
probably
just
looks
tell
like,
the AI art, like you say, here's the kind of thing I want, and then it makes it, and then you're like, oh, well, I want the eyebrows to be a little bit pointier, and I want like darker shadows in the back, and I want like, hey, can you like have thunderbolts coming out of his eyes, and you just like can tailor it on the spot by talking to it, and
I think the optimal thing probably looks like enhancing humans to the point where we could just do that ourselves. Like
yeah,
just make everyone that good of an artist, or that good of an artist if they spend enough time on it, and that able to like instantly produce cool things. Maybe like there's no reason it has to be AI if we can modify human brains in the long run. We could just be
yeah,
that smart and capable ourselves and get to have the experience.
it's true. I mean, I would prefer that. Though actually, to be honest, I don't have that much of a preference between those two worlds. Like, I think like a super helpful AI that like actually responds really well to my instructions is about as good as putting it in my brain, just because
Yeah.
uh, I just want to be able to control what the output looks like. I don't care if it's like within me or without me.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't have perfect introspective access to every process going on in your brain, although maybe you should, to the extent that is not going to cause a like recursive paradox as you're aware of the thing that you're aware of. I think that part of what's guiding my intuition here is I'm picturing the ideal world that we could one day have. And I like the idea of an ideal world that is built out of pretty simple elements and elements that are pretty human, where like there's optimization processes that aren't human, but they maybe aren't that capable initially, and humans have to like, I don't know, a video game world where humans are kind of the main actors and we're deciding how to assemble the blocks in the world to produce cool things. Feels to me like a more elegant world, and a world that is closer to my intuitive ideal than one where we have like an array of like godlike tools around us that we can outsource all of the things we want to do to. Like certainly like I don't want to like outsource to the AI the like adventure of like discovering a like forbidden cavern and exploring it and like, doing all those things. I don't want to outsource to the AI the like puzzle solving and discovery of trying to like make a new food recipe that combines two different things I like. That seems like a fun challenge. And art feels similar to me. Maybe I don't feel as much acute scarcity in the world today of like, oh no, we're missing out on so much beauty. And therefore I'm less desperate to, by any means possible, just like get more beauty in. So I'm thinking more about that as a goal, but other goals feel similarly salient to me.
Makes sense.
And probably we just disagree about some of the things about what utopia should look like.
And I probably just like value beauty more.
Probably.
It's funny, resentment. I don't think resentment needs to be is a bad. I think like, I mean, I don't know. It feels like morally neutral as an artistic
Yeah. So the
inspiration.
bad art has as an input obfuscation, lies, and resentment. So this feels more right coded. It's like bad art is leftist. It's people who have slave morality. Good art has master morality. People who value excellence and are happy with their lives and want to like express how great they are and how great the things they value are. That's what my brain pattern matches this to.
Yeah, like it's true that like resentment, like a lot of ugliness comes from resentment. But then, I mean, some things are like, I don't know, if your parents abuse you and you're resentful of it and you make art about that, that can be good. I guess it's just like less resentment is probably better in the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, it feels to me like art should start off with tons of resentment in it because that's just real. Art should be a mirror to humanity. And if things are going well in humanity, which includes art going well, but also like just normal human conversation going well, then over time, hopefully we can kind of unravel the knots of our own psyches and have kind of art and human society become less about resentment because we've unraveled those knots.
I agree with that. All right. Hall of Fame 11. wishes to be canonic versus wishes to destroy the canon. Uh, I don't know. I want art that like is in the canon with
Why not both?
Michelangelo.
Why not both?
Why not destroy it and be
Destroy
in
the
it?
canon and make a new one. That's it. I mean, I guess what it's saying here is this person wants art that is trying to be good by the same metric as the old standards, not trying to create a new standard.
Yeah. Well, I
To
don't
some
know.
degree.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree with that. But also like I don't know. And any art, I want Michelangelo. I want the Sistine Chapel to stay around. I
Yeah.
don't want to denigrate the Sistine Chapel, and so I want art that like is more Sistine Chapel-y and less trying
Yeah.
to say that the Sistine Chapel is bad. So I think I just generally agree that wanting to join the canon is better than wanting to destroy the canon.
Yeah. I guess my instinct is to say that it's a false dichotomy to say that the Sistine Chapel is in the canon versus not in the canon. It's more like Sistine Chapel is an object and it has good features and bad features. And I worry that a lot of artists might either ignore the flaws because it's in the canon or they're supposed to think it's amazing, or they might dismiss the merits because it's old fashioned and not the trendy new thing and not doing the specific cool thing they like. Like I think a lot of artists don't appreciate the cool things about very alien artistic traditions, and I think they should because that's part of humanity. Like I think the ideal artist kind of can see the good in all of these different crazy like artistic traditions, and maybe when you like add all the points up, the Sistine Chapel is like a top 50 artistic product of humanity to date. But that's a different perspective on it when you tally up the pros and cons and see it through clear eyes, like what are the actual features of this work of art versus the perspective I was pointing at before. But yeah, I think people do often have correct criticisms of the Sistine Chapel, if only intuitively. Like this is missing cool things you could do with art. This is like maybe some kind of local optimum, but there's better optima, etc. And then I think they probably miss out on some of the aspects of the Sistine Chapel that are importantly good and successful. And it would be better if they understood those things and also tried to transcend them.
Hints at forgotten values versus mocks the concept of values. I mean, I don't want.
I don't like either of these.
Yeah, both. Yeah, I mean, I want art that expresses good values. Mocking the concept of values is silly. I'm not sure how to read mocking the concept of value. Like, I guess mocking the idea that like there is such a thing as like kindness and truth and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't like art that is like
Yeah, I think this is important to get like relativist art and nihilistic art and cynical art.
Yeah,
like art that is kind of making it harder to be for something because it's like treating it as sophisticated that the cool thing to do is to not be for anything.
Yeah.
Don't like put your heart out there. Don't like be passionate and striving and like unironic.
Yeah, I don't like art that is like that. I like art that has values. I want art that isn't cynical in that way. But I don't think that they should be just forgotten values. I think they should be just some of them will be forgotten, but some of them will be things we know and
sometimes you should hint at them and sometimes you should just
be
a little less hinty. Yeah.
I wish more art was talking about how good the transhumanist utopia could be, because I think people just like don't realize how good it could be if we lived in the transhumanist utopia. So I'd want that art to be like a little on the nose because like people just really don't see how good it could be.
I wonder what would happen if we tried to make our own column of like the actual correct take on each of these. I think it would be kind of difficult because in many cases the framing is wrong.
Yeah, essential nature. Yeah.
Drug metaphor. What is the correct drug metaphor for what all art should do?
Mixture of MDMA and LSD and weed at the same time.
At the same time or alternating?
No, all at the same time. Yeah, just bliss and love and wonder and idea connections constantly.
I think we would probably produce different columns, but both of ours would be better than the Jash columns.
the bulletproof coffee column. Yeah.
Both of those would be better than bulletproof coffee, which I think should be part of the mix, but is not the be all end all of art.
Yeah. Empowers life versus enfeebles life. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I want art to empower people, but like, seems like almost orthogonal. It seems like almost not the thing that is relevant to art most of the time.
I don't want art to enfeeble people in the long
Yeah.
run. Maybe it can enfeeble them for like a day, but I don't want it to ultimately, as a collective human endeavor, produce humans who are like, I don't know, tangled up inside and less self-actualized. I'm not worried about that though, so I want to, yeah. I'm again interested in what Josh is experiencing that is making him terrified of this.
Like going to a Holocaust museum enfeebles me for like the day, but it probably empowers me in the long term.
Yeah. Moving down the Twitter thread Josh made, it looks like he has a bunch of like modern art here, like making fun of like signed urinals and.
I agree, those things are bad.
Exalting cathedrals. So I guess he likes cathedrals, even though
they're closer to weed than coffee.
Bulletproof coffee, like. Yeah. I mean, I could see the perspective where they're a little closer to coffee than to weed. They're not very much like either, I think.
14, beauty. Believes and tries to produce beauty versus spits on beauty and actively celebrates ugliness. I mean, your man out here agrees with that wholeheartedly. More art should be beautiful. Humans like it. It makes pleasure is good, and beauty is pleasurable. So like, it's real simple.
Yeah.
Like
I agree on the margin, in the current margin. I do like some spitting to happen, but currently I think there's too much. Like, and I think the spitting should come less from a place of like, aha, I have transcendent mere art and value, and more from a place of like, I don't know, spitting is fun.
Yeah, and also like novelty is fun, and this is like a way. This is the new way to make something ugly that you hadn't thought of before. Like,
yeah, like this is not transcending art. This is just playing a cool game.
Yeah,
we have not obsoleted Michelangelo. We have just found that spitting on Michelangelo sometimes is kind of neat.
Yeah. Conclusion: good art is man's divine right, terrible duty.
This is the best part of the list.
Bad art is whining, coping, seething, and a waste of time.
I think we can both fully agree that 15 is correct, and that is that. Like, there's nothing else to talk about here. 15 is just
you got
on the money. They nailed it. He should have just started and stopped with 15. Is there anything else even to talk about at this point?
Yeah. Well,
should we have any wrap-up thoughts?
Okay, my wrap-up question I have for you is, okay, if we were being perfect utilitarians, what do you think art would look like? Would there just be any art and we would just be focusing all on doing other stuff? Or would the art be like incredibly like telling people true things that make them do good behavior, like all just like propaganda towards good action, and like or would it be just like maximum bliss? Like, would it just be like as blissful as possible? Like,
I think it would depend somewhat on what it means to be a perfect utilitarian here. Like, for example, like I think there's some emergencies the world faces right now, where there's maybe a counterfactual version of humanity that is just able to focus on those emergencies and nothing else, and still like not burn out, flourish, have clear sight on the world, be like emotionally regulated, and just like, okay, I'm just the kind of organism that doesn't need to like experience beauty for the next 30 years. I could just successfully work on making the long-term future go well, and that's chill. That is not a version of humanity that's very similar to the current humans that exist today. So maybe your question that you had in mind was more like, if humans needed art to some degree to like not burn out and so on, how should we ideally handle that? If we were like being perfect decision makers, what were you imagining as like we're utilitarian now? Just like our brains work the same way, but now we are like extremely ideologically committed to
if we were extremely ideologically committed
maximize utility, and we're like smart and capable at doing that.
Yeah. What would art look like?
It's very hard to say, because I'm not a civilization of extremely smart people who have thought about this problem hard and for a long time. Like, step one is you could get some task forces to figure this question out, and then you do what they say, or like run experiments.
I'm not saying we should
Um,
necessarily do the utilitarian thing with art. I'm just saying I'm curious if we were doing the utilitarian thing.
yeah. So
I could
art
kind of
produces
see
utils.
what?
Art produces utils, obviously,
Yeah, it does. But like
but
maybe
there are not very many compared to if you like. It's like how you can be a vegan, or you can eat meat while trying to like influence how many vegans there are in the world as a whole, which will often have a larger impact on actual outcomes. Similarly, you can consume art right now and make art, or you can try and do leveraged things that have like produce large amounts of art in expectation. I think there'd be a lot more of the latter in utilitarian world, such
yeah,
as humans not going extinct. That's like a very leveraged way to make more art happen.
yeah,
Yeah, like also you don't want people to burn out and so on. So you do want to find the right orientation to life. Like the actual answer might be utilitarians would think hard about utilitarianism and go, okay, the correct attitude toward life is to think about utilitarianism very seldomly and have some like deontological rules that we're using to make sure that we're like thinking about like directing our actions in the right basic kinds of ways. And maybe like twice a year we have utilitarianism day, where we all rethink whether we should totally change our deontological rules, or not constantly like optimizing super hard because maybe that's just not the right way to make the human soul like flourish and like succeed in its goals.
yeah. I could imagine it just that a lot of the art is blissful, and then a lot of the blissful art is like encouraging people to like donate more to like effective charities and do things for X risk and stuff like that. And so doing like some mixture of bliss plus moral instruction plus truth telling in a very like optimized way that's like blissful, true, morally encouraging. I could see something like that being like the like utilitarian optimum.
Yeah. Like it depends on what our constraints are. Like art for children might include more of the like inculcate them into basic moral values and good ways of thinking about the world, good heuristics for doing well in life. I feel like there's diminishing returns once you've seen enough art that's like that, and you're like, oh yes, we're the rationalists now. We've like have the 45th story in a row that's all about how motivated reasoning is bad. It's kind of we get it at this point. What do we make art for now?
Yeah.
I guess there's an awful lot of stuff to cover in terms of what are the good values, what are the good techniques, etc. I suspect that there's an important thing here that's along the lines of like humans flourishing better when there's a feeling of slack, a feeling of like not everything being incredibly pushed to achieve some concrete end. Like it might be that the optimal way to use art is mostly just to create a sense of spaciousness and of not kind of trying to grind everything into utils and like make it more like just a relaxed thing to spend an evening on. That's like a break kind of from like your day job. Like day jobs should maybe be more about utilitarianism, and then you get home at the end of the day, you're burnt out, you don't want to watch a motherfucking movie about motivated reasoning being bad. You want to like play Zelda and like I don't know, waste your time in a sense.
Yeah.
That might be the best way to make humans actually flourish. It's all an open empirical question, I think.
Well, I think the question of what the utilitarian thing to do is very hard and to figure that out. So there should be a whole science of that. My general preference for art is that it's very much more blissful, much more beautiful, much more novel, much more ambitious. I think
More organic.
humans more organic. I think living nature is beautiful, and we could make cities more beautiful than nature. I think we could make it
Oh
just a
yeah.
pleasure. I think it could just be a pleasure to look around the world in cities that we're in, and in art galleries. It can be like sort of repositories of awe and grandeur, and like what the utilitarian thing is hard to say. But the thing I would want in the absence of knowing what that is just much more bliss, much more wonder, much more beauty. That's the main thing I want to see from the art world. Other things matter too. Like I do care about moral instruction some. I care about truth some for the art world, but I mostly just care about like beauty and wonder. And that's one reason
Yeah.
why I'm more aligned with, even though lots of Jash's or examples are silly, like he agrees with me more than Liam. that there should be more cathedrals. So like I kind of have to get his back, even if I think a lot of his things are silly.
Yeah, I wonder how many cathedrals Liam thinks there should be.
Like I know Liam said he likes Monet. He tweeted about that, but he was like kind of like felt like almost like felt bad about being as earnest as being like I like Monet. Hope that's cool, as opposed to like fuck yeah, of course I like Monet. Monet is awesome. Like the master of
So
color.
you feel more of a vibe
Yeah.
alignment here.
Yeah, the vibe alignment is like, of course we can do art better, you idiots. We're doing a terrible job. We're like, we've got elites that are doing dumb signaling games. We're not even trying to make buildings beautiful anymore. Like, what are we doing, guys? We're failing hard. Come on. And this guy agrees with me. Liam agrees with me less than that. Liam thinks that there should be more. I don't know. He thinks that like artists doing like little idiosyncratic things and ideological things are like basically good, and that like there's not like a total failure of the art world right now.
Yeah.
What do you want to see more of in the art world?
I want the things that you want, and I also want, the things I described. I want more experiments and research. A big thing I want is more honesty and more like art being part of how we communicate to each other as human beings, like bearing our soul to each other and getting a deeper understanding of who we are. I want art to help make life more interesting and make it have more of all the things that like produce human flourishing, which I think often includes stuff that is not locally extremely pretty or extremely like polished or extremely happy making, etc. Like I think humans get good things out of catharsis. They get good things out of dissonance. They get good things out of the whole mix, the whole thing. Like art is kind of an artificial category. I feel like it's just like what are some of the things that we're going to do to produce effects in other human beings, including effects via like static artifacts that persist over time, that are not like a newspaper article or whatever. But even newspaper articles, there's artistry and aesthetic choices that go into having effects with that. So like I basically just think of art as like a weird category, but the real thing going on is just humans interacting with other humans, and I want that to, like, I don't know, help us flourish.
Yeah.
I want people to have good stories and have like lives that are like trending toward what they want their lives to be, and in some sense what they deserve. But I think they deserve a lot of good things.
I agree with those things. I think a problem with a lot of art that I see is that it's trying to do a thing that it's not very good at. So like if you want to learn economics, like, it's better to learn it from a textbook than it is to learn it from a painting. And a lot of art is trying to make political statements that are like implicitly about economics. And I kind of hate that
I agree.
it's it's just not a very good tool for doing that. I think in general, we should use we should use tools for the things that the tools are good for. And we shouldn't use screwdrivers to hammer in nails. We should use hammers. And like, what are paintings good for? Paintings are good for like making beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
Good for like depicting things that like worlds that we'd want to see. Like there's things that paintings are good at, but
yeah, you could have a movie, a fiction movie or a comic book that's really good at introducing a bunch of economic concepts. Like I feel like textbooks kind of suck as ways of learning a field.
That's true.
Maybe the ideal would be a video game, actually. Like you have a very beautiful video game that teaches you economics.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I think that video games are like the ideal art form for most things.
Yeah.
Because it's just, well, you have audio, you have video, you might be able to do it in VR even, and you're interacting with stuff and it does stuff. That's just the art form that subsumes all other art forms. You could have a video game that involves just walking through the Louvre.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think more and more like artworks are going to be sort of like VR worlds, basically.
Yeah.
That are just.
Which is just like making art kind of an extension of life.
Yeah. Like you can do a much more optimization in a VR world than you can in the real world. And so like hey, do you want to have this insane experience? Come into my world.
Yeah,
Come into this portal into this world that I've just built. And that's good. I'm glad that we'll have the freedom to do that.
yeah. Like there's an interesting, mostly unexplored space here that's like the artwork that comes from arranging elements in reality, such as like does this like where this cafe is situated relative to a bridge in a city, or the arrangement of paintings in a gallery is like something that people think about. But we can go much further than that. You can like go like, what is the optimal chain of museums to see, and in what order? Like, what experience can you create if you're cultivating like 13 museums that are seen in a certain sequence and build on each other?
Why do you think it is that left wing people seem to be more anti beauty than right wing people in art? Left wing people like flowers too. What's their beef?
Maybe it's a class thing. Like, I mean, low. Yeah, there's a few things going on. I think one is that left wing people are trying to signal like solidarity with poorer people by being less into opulence, less into like the things that kings owned. I think that's part of it. Of course, I think often real life poorer people prefer the pretty things over the like brutalist things and the like very abstract forms of art. So they both have a claim to having more solidarity with the underclass, I suppose,
Yeah,
and are maybe to some extent fighting over who gets to be claimed to be like the real like friend of the underclass.
yeah. I think mostly, I think the underclass is helped by not by saying that the things that kings have are bad. It's by giving them kingly things. I think that's how you help poor people, not by denying that
Yeah,
kingly things are good.
agreed.
And I feel like it's a weird move that they're doing.
It is weird. Like it feels like there's some contingencies here. It didn't feel like it had to go this way, but I could see why it would be a stable equilibrium once it begins, because like conservatism is into the idea of keeping things the way they were in the past, or like returning to the glorious past. We could have just kept things very beautiful in a classical way, and then there would be no kind of debate about this. Instead, the arguments would be about other axes on which things had changed. Like science became a thing, scientific progress changed society in many ways, but you could have had conservatives and liberals fighting about those changes and not also fighting about artistic changes, because you could have just kept the old ways of doing things. So, like, what
Yeah,
is the thing that originally caused people to start innovating and like rebelling against like classical beauty? Like, I think that's a mix of like some people just wanted to signal some amount of sophistication and being above such affairs. Maybe some people, I don't know. I think if you read the Wikipedia pages about shit, people will often be like, "Well, World War I happened, World War II happened, all this shit happened. Didn't feel authentic to express my what's in me by making pretty things that are nice to look at. Ugly things were happening in me and around me, and I wanted my art to reflect that," which I think is very legit.
yeah,
But then I think there's some runaway effects that happen. Like now that is the trendy new thing. So people like glom onto that and imitate that, even when it isn't true for them. And then also, because it's a trendy new thing, conservatives will tend to be wary of it. And therefore it becomes a good way to signal your leftist like culture to like be into that.
yeah. And there's also a blank slate thing going on where people, at the same time people started to believe that you could change people's mind about what things they'll like. That like whether humans like flowers or not is a sort of fact about how they were socialized, and not sort of like a
Yeah.
deep fact about humans' preferences for the organic and the like
Yeah. That's quite
whatever.
interesting.
And that sort of happened at the exact same time as the World War II stuff was going on.
I don't think I could have predicted in advance that like Christianity would not be very blank slatist. Like it seems like Christianity is a like old thing that is very into the idea of like reforming humans and changing their nature, and like humans are fucked up and we're going to like fix that. It's very fixable. Likewise, like Buddhism, Hinduism, like a lot of these religions are very into the idea of humans being very modifiable. which sounds like a thing where you could then like have a thing where art is denigrated and people try to like kind of change the like human natural like preferences into something that's like more virtuous.
Mm. I've
And
seen
that maybe
some.
happened somewhat in like Islam, like less, at least they had a lot of beauty, but they certainly got rid of a category of beauty, which is like the human form in
Yeah,
traditional art.
there are religious sects that think that humility is good, and so their temples are very humble, their dress is very
Yeah,
humble,
they
and
don't
they
produce
are,
ornate art.
yeah, and because they think that that's like bad, and that they're like they should focus on more
Yeah,
important things, and that beauty is just vanity and stuff like that. And yeah, so there is some success in that. But I find that all of those art movements tend, or those religious movements tend to be about sort of neutralness, as opposed to ugliness. They're not trying to make their temples ugly. They're not trying to make the dress ugly. They're just not optimizing beauty very hard. Whereas there
yeah,
are art movements that are trying to optimize ugliness as opposed to neutrality.
yes, that's true. I wonder why that is. Like, certainly there are religious movements that are very into suffering, very into like
Mm.
hardship is good for you, pain is good for you, flagellate yourself, be like aesthetic. Although those don't tend to be incredibly popular, they tend to be more a thing of like monastic orders. So maybe there's a factor here of like some monks might be into this, but it's not going to be easy to sell it to the masses. And maybe similarly, the reason Christianity went in the direction of opulence rather than simplicity in like most of its art traditionally was just that it appealed to like the wealthy. Like it ended up and made it became like the established religion of the state. So you can spend money on it, so why not? Whereas if it had remained a like underclass sort of religion like it was originally, um, it might have leaned more over time into the like Spartan artistic signaling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the blank slate thing might be irrelevant to the why things went that way in recent times. Although something about it, yeah, I'm not confident about how those things interacted. Yeah, I propose that we wrap up this conversation. This was fun
Yeah.
though.
Any final thoughts?
I think I've said everything there is to say. We have resolved what art is and what it should become.
My final thoughts are build more cathedrals, more things to look like cathedrals, please.